Your attention, masters, mistresses. All systems functional for the Everything Geek podcast.
Hey, this is Rich McDonald, and I play Commander David Mason on Call of Duty Black Ops 2. And you're listening to Everything Geek podcast.
It's James Arnold Taylor, the voice of Obi-Wan Kenobi and Master Plo Koon in Star Wars: The Clone Wars, and you're listening to Everything Geek, the podcast.
Hey, it's Leif Gaffert. I played Uncle Ben's killer in The Amazing Spider-Man, and you're listening to the Everything Geek podcast.
Hello, I'm Simon Fisherbecker. You probably know me better as Dorian Moldavar from Doctor Who, or the Fat Friar from Harry Potter. And this is Everything Geek podcast.
Face it, Tiger. You just hit the jackpot with the Everything Geek podcast.
You're listening to the Everything Geek podcast, bringing you interviews from your favorite films and TV shows every week, and all of the latest news. Here's your host, Ruari Williamson.
Hello everyone, you're listening to the Everything Geek podcast. I'm your host Ruari, and joining me today is a very special guest. We have actor Ryan Andes, best known as the voice of Claude in Yu-Gi-Oh! ARC-V and Erazor in Yu-Gi-Oh! ZEXAL, and who also played Gustavus in The Widowers, Shep in Person of Interest, lead Bodyguard in Elementary, police officer in The Path, and Militia Man 2 in Madam Secretary. How are you today, sir?
I'm doing very well, Rory. Thanks for having me, man.
You're very welcome. It's a pleasure to have you on the podcast today.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to be here.
So getting right into my questions for you, Ryan, just for some background info for some of our listeners who may not be familiar with your background, can you tell us how you got into acting?
Absolutely, yeah. You know, it's funny. I was a lucky person, man. I had it pretty easy for getting into acting. It was in my family. My grandfather was a Broadway actor, and then had a Hollywood career after that. So you know, it was I was in a family of people who supported the artistic endeavors, especially the ones that involved standing in front of people and performing. Grandpa was a singer too, and so for me, I actually. I went to school for theater, but I also got a degree in music, in opera, actually. And then when I got done with college, I realized that I hated opera and never went back. But I came to New York, and my grandfather described it for him in the same way, as that I just sort of followed the path of least resistance, and knew that that's what I wanted to do. Any kind of performing, and it's just sort of, this is where it brought me, to voiceover and to having a Broadway show and doing TV and film and stuff. So here I am.
That's really great, and obviously it's really good to have that support from the family going right into it.
Yeah, it definitely helps. Yeah,
because not everyone has that, so as you said, it really helps having all of that support behind you.
Very true. Very true. Yeah, I lucked out.
Definitely.
And Grandpa was a cool guy too. He has a bit of a following. If anybody's interested, his name is Keith Andes, and he was like this, muscular, good-looking, strapping man, leading man type who did movies with Marilyn Monroe and had a big Broadway show with Lucille Ball, and did pretty well for himself in his day, and also did voiceover. He was the original voice of Birdman in the old Hanna-Barbera cartoon.
It's really interesting. Talent definitely runs in the family, that's for sure.
Yeah. I know. I got passed down the voice of the Andes men, I guess.
Yeah, definitely. Now, in terms of your work on Yu-Gi-Oh, can you tell us how you were originally cast in it?
Yeah, it's pretty standard fare as far as how that job came along. It was an audition for a guy named Darren Dunstan, who does a lot of the casting and directing for the show here in New York. And I'd been doing voiceover for commercials and various other small projects in the city when my agents saw this breakdown and thought that I was a good fit. It was for ZEXAL, for Erazor. And I went in, I met Darren, I read for him, and about, I think, a day later, he called me and told me that I booked it.
It's pretty cool. And were you a fan of the franchise before being cast in ZEXAL?
Well, I mean, I knew what it was. I think I had missed out on the whole Yu-Gi-Oh thing. I was a nerd as a kid, and I collected comic books and watched cartoons. I had every single original X-Men comic book card, and I still have them in my closet. But by the time Yu-Gi-Oh got really rolling, I think I had sort of, moved on. So I wasn't as much of a fan as I know people are, but of course I knew about it, and I thought it was great, man. I mean, also anytime you get to voice a character, whether it's on a cartoon or otherwise, it's the most exciting thing. So like, just getting a chance to work in an animated show was really cool.
Yeah, definitely, because you just never know what you're going to get when you voice an animated character. Like with theater or like on-camera work, you know what you're going to look like, but with animation, you could just be anything, basically.
Dude, exactly. And you actually don't know what your character looks like when you audition a lot of times. Sometimes they'll give you a quick breakdown and maybe like one or two pictures, but a lot of the time it's just kind of going with your gut and just feeling out what voice sounds right, and a lot of the time it's luck, but I'm glad this one worked out. I got lucky this time.
Yeah. So you didn't get any slides or anything for Erazor, you just did what you thought was right and you got the role from that?
Yeah. A lot of times too, you like form an idea before you go in, and he's a bad guy, so that kind of has a certain sound, and then he's like an insect, and so I sort of did. I remember when I did the audition, I did a lot of like insect noises. Like I added like a buzzing sound to his voice, and Darren was quick to be like, "Hey man, that's great and all, but we'll be doing that in post, so don't worry about the insect stuff." But he's also, you should know that Darren specifically also, he'll direct in the audition too. So, you're there with him, and he'll ask you to try certain things to kind of get the voice that he is looking for as well. So it's a collaborative effort.
Yeah, that's really cool. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's how you came up with the voice for Erazor, in the audition, but also with Darren's direction. Particularly in terms of getting rid of the insect noises.
I was doing a lot of buzzing, like stuff like that, and he was like, "No, we're not doing that." But we ended up finding a really cool voice for Erazor, which was unlike any voice I had done, because I'd done some video game stuff and have done quite a bit since. But this particular Erazor's voice was a little more high pitched and a little bit more creepy sounding. I mean, he was, he's kind of like a badass.
You moved on from Erazor on ZEXAL to the voice of Claude in ARC-V, a more prominent role. How did you come up with his voice?
Yeah, Claude was actually a lot easier. I was really grateful because Darren remembered me from ZEXAL, and so when he needed somebody for Claude, he thought of me. And when I read for Claude, it was, he wanted him to be a little bit more laid back. I mean, he obviously plays a secondary role to the president as his sort of, mindful advisor guy who sort of lurks, and, he sort of has information all the time. He's always there to inform the president about something that's going on. So he doesn't really there's not much of an emotional investment with Claude, which I kind of dig too. But he was in that sense, he was kind of very level. I could kind of dig into like the lower gravelly stuff of my part of my voice with him, which is so nice for a voice actor to not have to strain so much, because a lot of times especially with bad guys, or if you're doing battles and stuff, you're doing a lot of shouting and a lot of like grunting, and it just ends up being very straining on your cords.
Yeah, definitely. And I do actually notice that you mentioned that Claude is like a kind of different version of your voice, and I can actually notice that your voice is a bit similar to his, so I can definitely understand why he's a bit easier than Erazor.
Oh yeah. No, I actually really I love voicing Claude. It's a lot of the stuff I get is very big and very mean or very like shouty, and Claude was like the chillest cat. He was just kind of cool and kind of hanging out with Declan, keeping him informed, keeping him abreast in a very casual way. He got a little upset from time to time, but never to the point where he was like, Claude was not the kind of guy to scream. If he ever got upset, he'd go from like, hey, here to like, hey, what this guy, like he'd get a little grumbly. That's about it.
Like in one of their early episodes when Silvio disobeys one of his orders, and Claude's just like, do not disobey me, and Declan's Declan comes in and is like, let Silvio be, or something like that. It's not the line at all that Declan said, but
right,
that's one of the few times that Claude like raised his voice a little bit. So
that's true. They were few, but Claude could get his hackles up, but never too extreme. He kept it pretty cool.
Yeah, I just like how they gave Claude a little something to do that one time because you described him as a bit of a lurker earlier, and he just lurks up to Yuto's deck after Yuya and that whole duel went on, and then just casually Claude walks up and picks up Yuto's deck and takes it away.
Right, yeah, that's right. Yeah. Yeah, Claude's he's like a sinister cat, dude. He just sort of skulks around and does evil stuff, I love it. It's my favorite.
Yeah, they should have done that more often.
I couldn't agree with you more. I'll talk to Darren, see what we can do. Get more Claude, and maybe get a spin-off or something.
I'd watch that, yeah.
Good to know. I got one fan.
Yeah.
Thanks.
You're very welcome. What would you say is the experience been like working on both Yu-Gi-Oh shows?
Oh man, it's such an interesting thing. First of all, you never know how long the job is going to last, right? Because obviously I'm not the one writing it. I just show up whenever they need the voice done, and usually Darren's pretty good about letting me know. But it's a very disjunct process, right? Like I show up, and it's very much this is how it goes down. He's like, all right, so in this episode, here's what's happening. In this scene, you're talking to Declan. You've got to do blah 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 and go. Like that's kind of how it works. And you stand at the mic, and you have to match up your flaps and everything. But the experience is great. I mean, I think it's mostly because I really enjoy working with someone like Darren, and also Joe, who's the engineer. They're both really great guys. The company is super cool. The people there are all very lovely. Like I've just never had any bad experiences or nothing, nothing bad to say. It's just it's always like a very pleasant and very like fun experience. We're like a bunch of kids, we're like goofing off and like telling bad jokes, and like Joe he'll record snippets of voice like bloopers and he'll replay them to me later on just to mess with me. It's like the most hilarious thing ever.
That sounds like the kind of place I'd want to work at, that's for sure.
No, it's class, man. It really is. It's good times over there.
That's really great. What would you say has been the biggest challenges you faced while working on Yu-Gi-Oh?
Well, I mean, not enough work. No, I'm kidding. There really aren't many. I mean, I think what we touched on before a little bit, which is, voiceover work can be somewhat straining. So you, as a voiceover artist, you have to be mindful of how you use your instrument. And I'm lucky. I had classical training, so I have a better sense of it. But there would be days, for example, when I would be voicing a character, and then have to go to, say, like a musical theater audition where I'd have to sing. And so I it's a kind of a balancing act of, making sure you're not overdoing it on one thing so that your voice isn't good enough shape to be able to do the next thing, right? Because for us, especially here in New York, it's like such a crazy life here. Every day could be filled with numerous jobs, so it's never just one thing. So it's just about kind of maintenance, really, is what it boils down to.
It's really interesting. Now,
yeah.
Outside of voice acting, you're primarily a theatre actor. Has your acting in theatre ever helped you in a big way, or voice acting, or vice versa? Has voice work ever helped you in theatre?
It's a good question. I think that they are, without a doubt, they're connected. I think anything that I've done in regards to performing, it all draws on the same sort of skill set, and I apply that. I apply the training that I learned in school in theater to all of this stuff, even like commercial copy and things like that. It's a matter of knowing who you're talking to, knowing what your scene is about. There are certain guidelines that every actor, I think, follows in order to get the most honest and truthful performance that you can get. And I don't know if I have any specific examples of that, but like, well, actually, no, I do. I think with the last time I did a voice for a cartoon was for Pokemon. I think I mentioned I voice a character called Hala on Pokemon. I'm not sure if am I allowed to bring that up on your show? But this character was a very different take, and it's it's really hard to. Sometimes it's hard to. What will happen is, like, you'll go into a room, you'll record a thing, and then you'll leave, and then you'll come back, say, a week later to do the next episode, and you've completely forgotten what you sounded like. Like you built this character, you voiced it, and then it's gone. So there's a little bit of trickery where you're a good director or engineer will play you back your past material, so you can kind of use it as a touchstone to get back to where you were. But what I find interesting is that you really do need to be a good actor when it comes to this stuff, right? You can't just sort of fake it. I think that having a connection to it, being emotionally invested, really helps with the way things sound and with the way that the performance comes out. So in every regard, I think of doing what I do, which spans the map of theater to TV to voiceover to improv to it all all uses sort of the same skill set, which I think is useful in this too.
That's a really great answer.
Thanks. Thank you.
Yeah. Now, between voiceover, theatre, and on camera, like, it could be from any of these, which would you say has been the most challenging role in your career so far?
Yeah, that's another good question. It's really hard to pinpoint any one thing. I would say the one that was challenging on like all the levels was probably my first big Broadway show, my debut, which happened in 2013 with Big Fish, and I played Carl the Giant. And I was part of that production pretty early on. I joined the production in its workshop stages, and then went on to help develop the show in Chicago before Broadway, and then of course ended up doing the show on Broadway as well. And that's it was a wonderful process and like a fascinating thing to be a part of, man. I mean, it's a very rare thing for an actor to be part of an original theatrical production and help be part of the creative force as well. I mean, I'm obviously not one of the creators, but I was the only person to play that role, and so I was able to kind of have some propriety over it. And man, it was challenging in not only the ways that would be hard for any actor, which is like knowing your stagecraft and learning your music and being being good, but also I had to learn how to do everything on stilts, which was one of the most difficult things I've ever had to do, because I didn't not walk on stilts before. I was taught how to walk on stilts during the workshop, and then slowly got better at it as the show progressed, to the point where I was dancing and singing and acting most of the entire show on stilts. Now there thank God, like, I never had any big snafus. I never fell or really hurt myself, but it just took a lot of it took a toll on my body, man. It hurt my knees a bit after a while, and it, you end up exerting a lot of energy when you're on stage, because you're carrying around not only stilts, but you're carrying around all these huge costume pieces and stuff. So without a doubt, I mean, that was the hardest thing. And the other hard part is that our show, which was I believe one of the most beautiful shows to be on Broadway for a long time, it didn't last long. We only had about a 3-month run, and so it's really hard to create something and then have to say goodbye to it. But it's also part of our business, and it's a good lesson. But it's part of I think every actor has to go through something like that. Every job you have will eventually come to an end.
Yeah, definitely, and it's really interesting because you mentioned that it took a lot of energy, and you were lucky that you didn't have any mishaps or anything like that, but must have taken a really large amount of concentration not to make any mistakes while having the stilt.
Yeah, dude. I mean, sorry, I just dropped something. I remember the first time we had done workshop presentations of the show, but they were all in very big rehearsal rooms, which were all very safe. The first time we took the show to Chicago, and we were in the middle of our doing our tech, which was figuring out the lighting and sound and sets and stuff. And my entrance, it was my first time walking out on stage in the stilts on an actual stage. And I remember I stepped out on that stage and I looked down to my right, which was out into the audience, and the pit dropped off about 12 feet. And I remember, and I was about 2 feet away from the edge of the stage. And I remember having that chill of panic kind of run through me, thinking if anything happened, that could be it, I would be done if I fell. And again, thank God I didn't. But there were moments where I was asked to do some pretty intense stuff, and it was pushing the boundaries of what I was able to do in some ways. And when that became apparent, we changed it and made it more safe. But there were definitely moments where I was a little worried at some points. Thank God, again, nothing happened.
Yeah, but at the end of it all, must have been very rewarding, even though it was tough in the early days with those.
Oh yeah, please don't get me wrong. I mean, with what I'm saying now is just mild complaints compared to what the wonderful and glorious nature of that show was. I mean, I loved that show, and I'm so glad and so grateful that I got to perform it, and it was truly an experience of a lifetime, and one that I miss, but again, it's you're always looking forward. You put something to rest, and the next thing happens. And for me, it was actually pretty cool. I got to do Peter Pan Live on NBC with some really wonderful and talented people. And I wouldn't have been able to do that if I were still doing Big Fish. So, everything happens for a reason.
Yeah, definitely. And my final question for you, Ryan, do you have any upcoming acting roles or any other projects you would like to talk about? Pokemon may or may not be upcoming.
Yeah, that one we've already touched on. Hopefully still will be coming. Yeah, I did. I shot I was in a new TV show. I had a recurring role on a show on ABC. And unfortunately, the show got canceled before they got to my episodes, which is really a bummer. The show was called Time After Time. And it was a time traveling show about H.G. Wells, and it was wonderful. And some great British actors were on it as well, but they didn't get past episode 5, which is really unfortunate. And that would have been airing around now. I think they would have gotten to my episodes around this time. But barring that, I'm always working on various voiceover jobs. I just recorded some stuff for a Keystone Light campaign, so I did voice for that. I did a commercial for Castrol motor oil. I did just book a show for this summer. I'm going to be going up to upstate New York and performing the lead in Best Little Whorehouse in Texas. I'm going to be singing the sheriff in that at the Finger Lakes for a month in August. But that's kind of it for now. I mean, there's always something, right? But right now, that's kind of the long and short of it.
So that's all of our questions for you today, Ryan. It's been a pleasure talking to you on the podcast.
All right, thank you so much, man. It's been a pleasure for me too.
You're very welcome, and hopefully we can do it again sometime.
Yes, please have me back anytime. I'd be happy to do it.
Well, we'll look forward to doing it again sometime soon again, and thanks again for joining us, so take care. Bye.
You too. Bye-bye.
Time to wrap up today's show. Make sure to check out our podcast links. Check out our website, website.everythinggeekpodcast.com/EGP. Check out our Facebook page, www.facebook.com/everythinggeekpodcast. Check out our YouTube channel, www.youtube.com/user/everythinggeekcast. Check us out on Twitter, twitter.com/everythinggeekp. Check us out on Instagram, instagram.com/official-everythinggeekpodcast. Check out our Mixcloud profile, www.mixcloud.com/everythinggeekpodcast. Email us at the following email, everythinggeekpodcast@gmail.com. Check out our companion podcast, Everything Geek Comiccast, www.facebook.com/everythinggeekcomiccast. Make sure to check out the hosts' YouTube channels. Mine is www.youtube.com/user/Septus Destroyers. Check out Ryan Andy's website, ryanandys.com, and check out channel 1138 where we broadcast live from, www.channel1138.com. Geeks out, everyone.
So that was that was a really tough call on my part, leaving, and there's a longer story behind it that's probably not terribly interesting to anybody.
And I was recording audiobooks, and the guy who runs the audiobooks department recommended me to the lady and the guy who were working on Pokemon, and so I went downstairs, literally just 3 floors down.